Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Government Technology and Services Coalition Subject Matter Insight Session. We made it 3 times a charm. Thank you for everyone who's had the patience while we get the absolute best speaker lineup. We're thrilled to present them to you today to discuss accelerating modernization through cloud migration and enterprise data management. This series is part of the Government Technology and Services Coalition programming. It's a subject matter insight, which takes a deeper dive into one of the topics that's kind of, if you want to use the word plaguing, I guess you could, given we're in a pandemic, plaguing federal partners across government. So these sessions are meant to take a deeper dive into a topic of interest that's more general than Homeland Security and is certainly extremely topical and timely. So with that, I want to give a special thanks to Mark Logic, who made this webinar possible today, and certainly to Luke McCormick, former CIO of DHS, who has been instrumental in inviting all the right people and certainly will be a very dynamic and fun moderator today. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Luke, to steer our esteemed panelists through a lively discussion. And we do want to make this as interactive as possible. So please do contribute, ask questions in the question box, and we'll have an hour and a half to answer all your questions and hopefully, be the best session that you hear on this topic this year. Over to you, Luke. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Christina, and thank you, GTSC, for putting on this this fantastic program and allowing this platform to get this message out. So I really do appreciate it and want to thank all the panel members as well for taking the time out of their day. I know there's a lot of operational activity out there, a lot of business activity out there. So really do appreciate them taking the time to prep for this. And then we'll have a nice hearty conversation here. Well, we're talking about modernization and the acceleration of modernization through cloud migration and enterprise data management. What does that all mean? Well, I'll tell you, everyone talks about data being the new oil, right? That's a kind of an old adage at this point. But if you think about it, I'll state the obvious, if I may, that if you look at the OPM data breach, if you look at the Equifax, if you look at the recent events that have happened in the federal government, the SolarWinds, et cetera, they're not in there trying to figure out what kind of cool cloud configuration we have, so to speak. They're actually after the data, right? And so that's just sort of stating the obvious there. But at the end of the day, it's all about the data. And I think the federal government's done a great job with the Data Act several years ago, assigning chief data officers that have now been propagated across not only the federal, department and agency level, but certainly down to the operating components, of which we have 2 here today. Established the CDO Council, a lot of policy and plenty of governance out there in regards to this subject. But all along the way that happens, you have this tectonic shift in technology, right? You started with sort of an on-prem play, and next thing you know, you had a cloud play, and now you have a hybrid play, all kinds of tools and techniques to ensure that you have a good security and that you can use it properly and slice it and dice it, et cetera. So a lot of different things to talk about today. We'll try to cover as many of those as we can. Couple of pieces of information before I let the guests introduce themselves. One is, Christina has mentioned, we will in fact give time at the end of the program here, about 10 minutes, for you all to fire in questions. We urge you to put in questions along the way. I'll try to sift some of those out if we can. The panel members actually have access to that as well. So we'll try to make that as interactive as possible. And then we're certainly going to give a few minutes at the end for each panel member to sort of wrap up and give their final thoughts. All right, with that, I am going to ask the panel members to introduce themselves. And Michael, I will start with you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Karras. I'm the TSA Chief Enterprise Architect, as well as the Chief Data Officer. So I have the opportunity to wear 2 different hats at the same time, but it kind of brings a unique perspective of understanding the data and then bringing it into the business and understanding the business needs of that data as well in the enterprise to drive forward the mission.
Appreciate
Thank you.
that. And two hats and two very large hats, I might add. Ken, could you introduce yourself?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's well, and thanks to GTSC for sponsoring this webinar. My name is Ken Clark. I'm the ICE Chief Data Officer and also the Assistant Director, Office of Information Governance and Privacy. And similarly, we have a unique organizational structure for doing data management. I'm actually a peer organization to the Office of the Chief Information Officer, and we fall under the Office of Management and Administration at ICE. So in my portfolio, I have the information governance team, there's a data management team, the privacy team, and then the Freedom of Information Act. So really our entire line of business, so to speak, is enterprise information and data management. So that gives us a unique opportunity to work closely with the program offices to deal with the issues that are related to the privacy issues, policy issues, a number of the issues that impact data and information management. So it's a unique environment, and also it's a great environment for working with the department writ large. Thank you very much.
Once again, very broad spectrum of responsibility there. Thank you, Ken, for that introduction. Fred, over to you.
Thanks, Luke. Fred Britton, Director of DHS Cloud Services at CACI. Some of my past experiences include leading initiatives regarding big data, cloud architecture, migration, app development, data science, and cybersecurity. Spent the last 6 years working within the DHS space, and 10 years prior to that in DoD. I'd say a common thread in my experience is helping clients secure, structure, and leverage data to solve their mission needs. So for that reason, I'm happy to be a part of this panel, and I'd like to thank GTSC and Luke for hosting this.
It's our pleasure. Last, we have Mike, and I'm going to refer to him as Mike versus Michael. So there's a little bit of a nuance. We do have two Mikes here. We're going to stick with Michael as Michael Carras. And Mike, we're going to ask you to introduce yourself.
Sure. Mike Batichak. I'm with Ardent. I'm our Chief Strategy Officer. I've been working in the department for, almost starting 15th year. So started in 2006 on some information sharing programs. Although I'm listed here as number 4, I'm certainly not the cleanup hitter amongst our conversation, but looking forward today, talking from two perspectives. We are supporting other chief data officers within DHS and also hosting enterprise platforms and distributing data to other partners, whether that's vertical and horizontal information sharing across the department or down to fusion centers, state and local partners, or up and through on the high side to the rest of the IC. So those two perspectives are what I'll be adding my talking points to the group today. Thank you for having us.
Mike, I really do appreciate that. And this goes for Fred. It actually goes for all of the partners out there across the community. I don't know how many partners we have versus feds. I know there's a lot of feds that had signed up, which I'm really happy to hear that. But, you know, look, it doesn't go unnoticed that we have a lot of folks, I think, Mike, you pointed this out, that have been with us on this journey in this community for many, many years. And again, always make a purpose to say partner versus vendor versus, you know, whatever other term. It is a partnership, right? I used to say all the time when I was in federal service, we cannot go 1 day, 1 hour without our partners being right there beside us to make this mission happen. So I really do appreciate that. Michael, I'm going to start off with you, and let's talk sort of at the 30,000 foot level. Then, as you'll see through the questioning, we'll work our way down there. And let's just talk about the overall strategy. You have a lot of responsibility over there. And I'd love to hear, and I think the audience would love to hear, just sort of the state of the strategy regarding the data and how you have that laid out across your environment there, just from a pure strategic perspective.
Well, TSA is fairly young in the journey of looking at the aspects of enterprise data. Some of our sister components have been a little further along down the road in that space. And our strategy has been to start to define and understand what data do we have where within the enterprise. Because before you can get to other places of maturity, you need to understand what exists, where does it exist, what's the shape of it. So when you start to ask business questions later on, you can understand where does that data need to be pulled from. Additionally, that kind of goes along with the understanding of that data and identifying it is to put in place a governance structure. So those have been our two main activities, is to, do a data call, start understanding what data sits where, and then putting in place a governance structure. Because when you recognize that you have, 3 or 4 systems that all house, I'll just use the term inventory data, well, you need to understand through a governance process which of those systems should which data elements come from. And sometimes it's surprising that it's not all from one system, but you get little tidbits from each of the systems that need to come together to really paint the most accurate picture for yourself. So we have embarked on a journey of formalizing that governance process, defining it, getting governance groups from across the entire agency in play in order to make those business determinations of what data is the authoritative data or what data is to be the trusted data, as well as getting that catalog of understanding where it exists in the enterprise.
Yeah, so super important too. I mean, it's what data, where is it? You've got system of record, you got low side, you got high side, lots of governance coming from different places. I'm sure that's a daunting task just to get your arms around the entire situation so that you can make good use of it, make the proper decisions, et cetera, along the way. Ken, how about you? Same question. Just give us a state-of-state top line overall strategy of the ecosystem that you're operating in over there at Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Yeah, Luke, I actually happy to say that we just published our ICE data strategy. Actually, it's available at ice.gov at the Office of Information Governance and Privacy section. And really, as we were developing that strategy, so we have that top, as you're mentioning, at the top level, we were able to work with the program offices. We're able to look at some of the, obviously the ICE strategic plan had some big influence in how we were going to address the data strategy. And we also followed the model. I think many folks are aware of the information sharing environment, which was part of the which was part of the Reform Act after 9/11 that created an information sharing environment. So what we're looking at is building a framework, which we call the investigative information sharing environment. So that addresses all the partners that we work with, whether it be internal to ICE or external, obviously, and then federal, state, local, tribal partners. But looking at the information that we have and the data, so we have law enforcement information, Homeland Security information, immigration administration information, and then business operations information. So that way we can kind of put a taxonomy that addresses the various mission needs that ICE needs to support. So of course, and we also, as Michael over at TSA, we have a data governance board. So we're able to ensure close coordination across the program office and the information technology teams. And also looking at working closely again on the areas of information analytics, data analytics, and tying it again to the mission needs of ICE following the construct of the data strategy that we published. Now, as far as next steps, we're developing a roadmap, which is essentially the implementation approach for hitting many of these areas and the goals and objectives of our data strategy. So it's going to be projects and various policy refinements and such.
That's fantastic, and I'm really glad to hear. It sounds like that information that you described there is being published publicly, right? I'm okay, fantastic. Maybe what we'll do along the way here, as we have this conversation, we'll throw that link into the chat session so everyone can pick that up. I think that'd be kind of cool. A little bit of interaction there. Fred, over to you. You had the unique opportunity to sort of see it striped across the entire ecosystem, right? It's undoubtedly several different agencies, perhaps in the private sector as well. What does that look like from where you stand and what you're seeing as far as these multi-dimensions?
So, Luke, I appreciate that segue because it ties nicely to two topics I wanted to talk about, which were industry trends that we're seeing over the last year, and then kind of into what we're seeing from a data management perspective. So for the last year, COVID-19 rapidly accelerated cloud adoption as a large portion of the population moved to remote work. In a recent survey by Flexera of 750 tech professionals around the globe, 93% of organizations indicated they have multi-cloud strategy, whereas 87% indicated they have a hybrid cloud strategy. So again, whether those strategies are in place or not, I think it's on the forefront of people's minds. We're also seeing functional boundaries between business and IT continue to recede, enabling enterprise-wide data collection, providing stakeholders with the correct data and when they need it. Volume of data management organizations continue to grow. We're expecting that to grow 25% compounded year over year until 2025. So when you look at these trends combined, they're leading organizations towards a multi-platform environments characterized by a combination of multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, and on-prem. So, what does that mean then for data management strategies, and especially in the coming year? What I would expect is organizations are adopting end-to-end hybrid data management platforms to enhance their visibility across cloud, hybrid, and on-prem environments. Data fabric is emerging as a concept in the data management space, which enables organizations to integrate data management processes, connect disparate data sets and infrastructure types across various locations, be it on-prem, cloud, hybrid environments, and provides a single view of organizations' data, facilitating analysis of data irrespective of location or format, while offering a greater level of control. Another trend is the application of AI and ML via augmented data management, or ADM, to manage an ever-evolving complexity in data diversity and disparity. Specifically, ADM looks to automate operations related to data quality, metadata management, database management systems, etc. We continue to see extensive usage of ADM in machine learning, data catalogs, application policies, business rules, and classifications.
A lot of complex environments there that we're talking about, both wide and deep, undoubtedly, and a lot of good insight there in regards to things to think about, including, I'm glad you brought up the AI and ML, right? Now that we have this treasure trove of data, we're certainly getting smart about how to process it, how to use it, and make sure that we're using it correctly too, right? That's a big issue that's out there these days. Mike, how about over to you? Give us a state of the state. What are you seeing out there in regards to the strategy play across the ecosystem?
Yeah, great, thank you. And I'll echo a couple of points the chief data officers made in their opening remarks, as well as some of the things Fred said. Number one is data is a shared asset. So you heard Michael say, I have a piece, you have a piece, somebody else has another piece of that information, and that makes the data. But what the end goal that we're seeing commonly is everybody's moving to more data-driven decision making, right? So you have to rely on that data. And similar activities, we see a varying maturity, either at the component, the headquarters, or individual program level, where some people are still at what I'll call the hindsight level. What happened? Where others are organizing their information, being able to look slightly forward, more in the forward way of driving rather than their review mirror, and getting to more of an insight. But everybody, to Fred's point, wants to get to AI ML and be predictive and have foresight into where things are going. Those things are impacting the decision making, but it's availing the data so that it's closer to where it's needed in demand. That will then become the ability to make a decision based on where that information is. So it's all about speed. So you see, as a technology trend, you have the ability to ingest information rapidly, millions of records per second. You have the ability to then scale and make it available in the cloud and take advantage of cloud computing to make it available to a wider audience. And then the last piece becomes, who do you share it with? Who's your customer? Are they an internal federal entity? Are they another partner? Are they an external commercial entity that's necessary? And if there's an external identity, how do I validate who they are forget the type 2 error. We'll just say, are they who they are? Especially when you're not in a construct behind a DHS firewall or behind the tick. So you see the technology trends influencing where we go with our architecture. We see the building of a vision and a plan. I don't think anybody is necessarily quite there yet. Everybody's embarking on a plan, building out a roadmap, building from the architecture and infrastructure they have today, and then with a view to how do we get to AI ML in the future.
Yeah, you raise a good point about sort of the sovereignty of the data and I remember spending countless hours, days over just third-party rule type issues about who has the rights to the data, right? In regards to I've taken data, I've fused it with some FBI data, and now can I share it with state and locals? That's sort of one sort of daunting task. And then, okay, how do I identify and make sure that that person I am going to share it with is actually that person, right? We talk about data being the new oil, and we know identity management is right there. It's the new oil, right? And it's certainly one that seems to keep everyone up at night in regards to how to really ensure ourselves that we have a good, solid environment there. I think about things like zero trust. Ken, I'm going to throw it over to you, and let's talk about architecture. I know, as I mentioned, we have this situation now where we've got, again, a lot of policy, a lot of governance, a lot of data, and a ever-moving environment in regards to the tectonic shift in different types of technology, AI, ML being yet another one, all the hybrid and transformational technologies there, and then all the tools and techniques that kind of deal with all that, right? Talk a little bit about, how is ICE getting their head around all the architecture? And I want to say, first of all, thank you. Ken did publish that link out onto the chat, so that's available to everyone. So really do appreciate that. Yeah, how do you all get your head around all of that complexity?
Yeah, Luke, it's really, I'm a strong proponent that you got to have a federated approach. You've got to be able to work across all the different product lines that you have. I think it's important at a larger departmental level to have the federated approach, and then you also have to do it at the agency level. And that's really what we did. As we developed our data strategy that was focusing on how to tie in the policy issues, how to tie in technology, how to tie in security management for data, how to tie in the whole dimension. In fact, we've done an inventory, going out there and inventorying all the different data sets that we have out there, so that if for investigators, if they're doing work, they can know where the data is. You really have to know your data, and the only way you're going to know your data and what your agency has is you got to be working together collaboratively across the common mission area, and getting, again, buy-in across those program offices. I mean, if you look at ICE, ICE was the largest DHS entity that went to 100% cloud, and that's over 175 different business systems that get pulled in there, and that's a daunting task. My hat's off to our Chief Information Officer, Rochelle Henderson, and the team. It's a daunting task to pull all this together, but then also working with the department so that there's interoperability and connection. And that's one of an important area is interoperability. One of the things we're doing is we're developing a formal standards program, actually what we call the ICE data taxonomy, which follows very much, for those that are familiar with the National Information Exchange model, that's been around for a number of years, where you have, again, a core. So we have the ICE core, which is those commonly used data sets across multiple data sharing scenarios. And then, of course, you're going to have various selected locations. I mentioned the different 4 types of information we're dealing with. But, having that standards taxonomy, that then is going to allow interoperability within our agency, but then also we're connecting very closely with the DHS CIO and the acting chief data officer over there, on the various domains that are being established at the department. One of them have, for example, law enforcement domains. So we're having a cohesive approach to how data then is going across our law enforcement partners, but then also ensuring that it's going to be shared within the Department of Homeland Security writ large. I mean, there's 10 different law enforcement organizations, so that's a huge community there. So really, I think that's how we're doing it. I mean, we're like Michael, you know, we're still working through and getting the processes in place, but we're moving down the road. That's why we have a roadmap, to coin a phrase, is getting us down to further interoperability, integration. I'm going to say unity of effort, really, in data management and supporting the mission.
Yeah, you know, people don't think about that. I'm sure they do to some degree, but you do have very much a north-south type issue that you've got to manage, and then very much a horizontal issue, right? As you described, several law enforcement entities inside of DHS, and then a whole treasure trove of them outside of DHS, right? And so how do you manage all that sort of in all those different variables? So have to have a good architecture, have to have a good governance and structure. And my hat's off to all of you for really trying to tackle that, you know, sort of one layer at a time. Mike, you look at it from a different perspective. You see it across the spectrum. You're seeing lots of entities out there that are implementing various types of architecture to sort of tackle this, if you will, some working probably better than others, admittedly. Give us sort of your perspective on, from an architecture standpoint, what are you seeing out there about how, you know, agencies and departments are solving this, or perhaps maybe even broader than that in the public sector, or excuse me, the private sector?
Sure, I think we'll come back to the governance piece at the end.
Sure.
One of the important things when you kicked off our session, you talked about operational responsibility. So operations, things are happening right now, and so one of the biggest influences to architecture that we're seeing is how operational do you have to be? You know, older constructs put data where it is, a data lake, a data bog, you know, whatever you want to call it, but there's operational data that's necessary. So it depends upon your speed to mission, and they're all different. So the speed at which you have to rely on information and or information from other partners is going to dictate your architecture as you go forward, and being able to push it or serve it to your customers or other decision makers. So then that also, the architecture, you need to talk about the data quality. So the quality of that data and how it's used, and how do you know, curate it and keep it constant. Architecture we talked about from an AI ML perspective. We got customers or clients, partners that say, yes, I want to do AI ML. How often is your data updated? Annually. Okay, great. So how are we going to study this over the last decade, the next decade, et cetera? So the speed at which data is improved, the quality that it's enriched, those are important things that impact the architecture. From a governance perspective, then the business rules that kind of establish that is similar to what Ken described, your taxonomy, your data catalog, but you're defining how your information is shared, how collaboration occurs, utilizing a mean data exchange. We are involved with some of the original IEPDs for suspicious activity reporting. How do you make SARs available across the department? So all of those are impacting. So you know, the speed at which the data changes and how often and the frequency that you need it.
A couple of things there. One, you mentioned NEAM and IEDP, and I always like to allow the listening audience to make sure they understand what those things are. So can you tell us what is NEAM? What does that stand for? What is IEDP? Just so people understand that. You there? Mike? Looks like we lost Mike. Okay, so Mike, there he is. Wow, we got two mics going on. Mike, you there? Mike? All right, well, while Mike gets himself recalibrated, let me throw it up to Michael to talk about architecture. ICE talked about, they did a sort of a wholesale shift, if you will, into the cloud, right? And we had Rochelle talking in public the other day, and she made a good analogy, right? We moved into the cloud, and we've got a lot of luggage, and we're now sort of unpacking some of that luggage and making sure that we get it all in all the right places, which I thought was kind of an interesting analogy. And hats off to Beth Capello and all those other folks that really did a forced march there and got all that into that environment. Michael, if I understand correctly, TSA sort of in the process, right? They've got some stuff in the cloud, a lot of stuff still on-prem, all kinds of hybrid configurations there. Let's talk about your architecture a little bit and sort of how does that look? What does it look like? Is it going to evolve as you go on this data journey?
Well, we're definitely in a hybrid construct, if you will. We're aggressively moving many different systems and applications into a cloud. At the same time, while that goes on, some operational / mission hesitancy with some things that I'll call mission critical in certain space for moving too rapidly in that environment. So we're definitely in a hybrid construct. One of the things we are working to do, though, is kind of, to Ken's point, comes down to standards. As you start moving into the cloud and you move multiple applications, we're working to standardize how we do that with respect to our data, and looking at the construct, especially in some cloud environments, to create the construct of data as a service, so that you're not picking up all of the, I'll call it, data and garbage that you had and simply relocating it someplace else, but you're actually, through that process, cleaning it up, if you will, some data cleansing, some data profiling activities, for getting it into the cloud, and then saying, okay, we're now going to expose that data as a service to everybody that needs it in order to utilize it and leveraging it going forward. So that transition is actually a wonderful opportunity, and we're trying to seize that opportunity. Additionally, one of the things that we're trying to deal with going forward in terms of looking at all of our data and understanding at that inventory is to understand what is our most valuable data as we go forward. I submit to you, we spend a lot of money protecting data, but not all data is necessarily worth protecting, if you will. Sure. Especially if you go to replicate that data into, reporting environments to get reports out of, or run what-if analysis. It's not your source data. And so we're trying to evolve our architecture to look at, making sure we invest the necessary dollars to protect the data that's most worth protecting, if you will, from that construct. Because the other thing we're starting to see is the rapid expansion of data that we're dealing with. And I want to kind of draw out the differentiation between data that's housed in information technology and data that is produced by what I will refer to as operational technology. Not to be confused with the Internet of Things, but starting to move in that direction. It is dedicated pieces of technology that produce a plethora of data. I'll use as someone else's example, a jet engine. The jet engine, with all its stuff, produces a ton of data that gets offloaded by most engine manufacturers when the airplane pulls back into the airport, that the engineers can then use and leverage later on. Well, TSA also has operational technology out there that all of you have seen going through every checkpoint in every airport. There's a lot of data being collected from that you're looking to apply analytics to, apply business intelligence to, and utilize. But the volume of that data is tremendous in order to be able to work through it, which is very different than the data that you have and you see coming out of your information technology systems. So we're trying to appreciate how we handle that huge volume growth, as well as being able to, perform necessary analytics, and looking at that moving forward down the road, recognizing the huge data that is created through that and treating them differently, not trying to treat everything the same.
It's a very good point. I was going to react admittedly when you were talking about, different types of data and different layers, and, not all the data is the same. And undoubtedly that's the case. Sometimes one could say you're right, but it's just easier to protect it all the same, just have a homogeneous type of technical solution as to how you do that. But now you're starting to talk about, video data, voice data, and spectrum data, et cetera. You're into a whole nother plethora, as you described there, of different types of activities. You raised a good point too about services. Again, another technology that has really sort of made it onto the forefront now, that allows various systems to just go out and sort of grab that data and bring it into an environment, fuse it, and turn it into a solution, versus, hey, I've got to bring the whole thing over, make another copy of it, go through all the wranglings of, now we have a duplicative copy, et cetera, which certainly isn't the architecture that you're looking for. Certainly something that's tough to maintain. Mike, I think you're back with us, correct?
Yes, I said
Okay.
suspicious activity reporting, and poof, there I went. So
Yeah, boom.
I said the magic word.
Yeah. Well, what two other things you said that we just want you to define for the audience there was, I believe it was EIP and NEAM. If you could just define what those are so the
Yes.
audience understands them.
Sure. And Ken talked a little bit of the National Information Exchange model. So the NEAM started 2005, 2006 timeframe between DOJ and DHS to exchange. And then an IEPD is an information exchange package document. So it describes the details, and we're going to talk about metadata here in a little bit, the elements that are common within that domain interest. Ken talked a little bit about creating different domains. There's a cyber domain that's his pretty much constructing and building its data model. And that is it's utilizing the NEAM IEPD construct, which is the package documentation helps developers understand the XML that is used to move the information from one place to another. So there's a common framework that's established in the system that I might be building, you might be building. Where there aren't IEPDs in a USCIS contract, for example, we created a reference data as a service, RefDAS, we call it, so that it was a common mechanism utilizing a similar NEAM conformant construct, but enabled the location, what country code that you may be in this system Y, system Z, et cetera, having a microservice construct that enables to act in the same way that a NEAM conformant IEPD would, where a domain may lack.
Yeah, no doubt, and super important. I think the very hard work that was done with NEAM to lay those standards down and then broaden that out was a game changer for the law enforcement community. And of course, there's IEPs ever important, right? We've got to agree that we're going to speak English, and then we got to start talking about how we're going to use that data, the interface, the security, et cetera. Really important document as you look at these various interfaces across the board. Fred, going to go over to you and talk about the architecture question. Again, you have a perspective there where you're seeing it across the board, what's working, what isn't, what's sort of the the go forward strategy that's being used as we get into these ever complex environments. Give us a sort of point of view there as to what you're seeing in regards to the architecture question.
Again, Luke, you perfectly segued into what I wanted to talk about, but I think data architectures look to address the increased complexity of legacy architectures characterized by a patchwork of add-on capabilities and how such architectures hamper an organization's ability to grow. Kind of looking out in terms of what we're seeing in industry and kind of the trends going forward, I'd like to kind of touch on 6 trends that I think are kind of the way ahead for data management. The first is the shift from on-prem to cloud-based data platforms. Again, I talked about this earlier. Cloud adoption is accelerating rapidly as it allows organizations to scale in terms of storage and compute, as well as leverage some emerging capabilities. The second trend is batch to real-time data processing. In recent years, the cost of real-time data messaging have decreased significantly, paving the way for its use. And I think this also kind of speaks to the concept Mike was getting at with speed of data. Next is pre-integrated commercial solutions to modular best of breed. I think this one's kind of key as we start to peel apart this concept of a multi-fabric environment. Legacy data architectures, produced by large solution vendors, are being replaced by highly modular, best in breed architectures, often comprised of open source components. Next, you have point-to-point to a decoupled data access. Organizations are leveraging APIs to accelerate data access across teams and improve collaboration. 5, enterprise warehouse to domain-based architectures. This kind of represents the trend away from centralized data lakes to domain-driven designs that can be customized for fit. And 6, rigid data models to extensible data schemas. This kind of refers to the schema-light approaches that offer greater flexibility in terms of exploring data with fewer tables and able to support analytics.
Yeah, a lot of, again, a multifaceted type of situation there when you start talking about architectures on a very complex subject that, once again, more data, more complex, a lot of different issues, and the never-ending threat that we have, if you will, of these various activities kind of coming in, rifling in there and trying to get at a lot of that data. We're going to switch over and start talking about metadata. And I want to start with you, Michael, and just give us the context. You talked about this environment that we're in, that you have this, in your case, a very much a hybrid environment, right? It's an evolving environment and will continue to evolve. I don't know if TSA, I certainly don't want to speak for you all, that are going to be a full sort of an ice play where you're going to be completely into the cloud. Certainly not completely on-prem. I imagine you're going to have some sort of a mix. All that being said, while you're in this state of evolution, if you will, you have this sort of, this metadata play that's in process and the use of metadata. And let's talk about sort of how you all are using that environment when it comes to the metadata subject.
Well, the metadata is extremely important, kind of to iterate a previous point by Ken. You need to understand your data. In order for that data to be useful to the mission, to the business, there needs to be a lot of understanding around it. Where was it collected? How was it collected? How old is it? How recent is it? Because otherwise, the business starts asking questions. And if you don't understand what's going on with that data and you just start applying analytics or anything else against that data, you may be coming away with all the wrong answers based on the questions that were asked. And, within our construct, sometimes I tell people it doesn't matter whether it's on-prem or whether it's in the cloud, you need to understand how it got there to begin with and what it represents and what it means before you start trying to do anything with it, either on your own or through, data science teams or something of that nature. One classic example I cite inside TSA is a lot of people are familiar with our secure flight system, and they often refer to it as, quote, passenger data. And I have to remind people, it's not passenger data, it's reservation data. Michael Karras can be on 5 different flights for the very same day with different airlines, and that data shows up. So if you start approaching that data, coming at it from being a passenger perspective, you're going to possibly be getting wrong answers because you're going to go, we have a data quality problem. This person's in there 5 times. Well, yeah, that's right. But if you have the metadata wrapped around that, to understand that when that data is shipped off or goes to someone else for data sharing, then it helps to inform that business process. So we're doing our best through these different things, including IEPDs, such as were referenced earlier, data management plans, and sharing our metadata with other people that we're also sharing our data with, so that when they get it, they can properly utilize that data and not end up with the wrong answers at the end of the day.
So what's sort of the top technique that you're using to deal with your metadata there? You've talked about a lot of different things there. I'm just curious as to something that's coming up in the questions.
The largest thing we're dealing with right now on the metadata is actually kind of working with what I'll refer to as the data steward. I prefer to use that term as opposed to data owners, but data stewards.
Very
in terms
carefully
of,
worded there, I might say.
You know, yes, definitely prefer to use the term stewards of the data, because typically those folks are the closest to their data in understanding the nuances of their data, and then working with them to get that documented as part of the metadata, you know, associated with their data.
Sure.
So for us, at least we're at the upfront portion of that. Obviously, there's tools that you can use, you know, when you go system to system for data tagging and, you know, those types of activities that get you into more of an automated portion. But I submit, at least as we've been looking at it, you need to have this other portion engaging the business before you can attempt to automate pieces or parts of that.
100%. I think that's, again, these tools and techniques, and we'll stick with the tools for a minute, seem to be getting better. I think you would admit that, you know, that the evolution of those from a sort of a Gen 1 to a Gen 2, allowing you to tag the data and do the things that you need to do to properly use it, appear to be getting better, but could always be continually refreshed. So perhaps there's an opportunity out there for folks. Fred, I'm going to throw it over to you. I should have asked, actually, probably Michael, since we're talking about metadata. Just give a simple explanation. What is metadata for those that might not even know what it is? It sounds kind of cool, but what is it?
Sure. So metadata is in essence data about data. Essentially, it performs 4 functions: classification, description, guidance, and control. You know, when we talk about a metadata management system, it's a systematic handling of how organizations store, access, and use data connected to digital assets.
Fantastic. And so and thank you for that definition. Very elegantly done, I might add. How about sort of, okay, so what are you seeing out there in regards to tools and techniques in regards to the use of metadata, being able to apply it properly, being able to do the things like Michael was describing, tag it, et cetera. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing out there.
So, I like to think about the benefits of metadata in the context of the multi-platform environments that we're talking about, right? And so some of those are, having a common data library to control authoritative data sources, for metadata, allowing data normalization across systems and on different platforms. It provides a lexicon for multiple stakeholders working in the same environment. And I'm thinking about, multiple CSPs, integrators, data management service providers, security service providers, all supporting a client under one contract. Leverages tagging to track cloud spend as organizations look to expand cloud usage across multiple cloud service providers. From a mission perspective, it ensures files are tagged, categorized, and organized correctly, making it easier to find and share data, facilitating data sharing across departments or even across organizations. And I think metadata is also particularly useful in managing unstructured data, as it allows for the standardization of naming conventions and categories.
Do you feel like there's enough maturity in the tools that are needed to make sure that we have a good metadata ecosystem?
So I think the tools continue to evolve, but I think what metadata is kind of a building block of how we manage data itself. It remains unchanged, right? And I think that's kind of the beauty of metadata. But the tools that we use to leverage it, I think, are continuously evolving.
Sure, and I think they will continue to evolve over time, which I think is a super positive type of situation. Ken, I guess a couple things. One, you talked about, again, this forced march, if you will, into the cloud. And that was done in a very tight time frame, let's say. You're now in there, you've been in there for a little while. You've been at the CDO role for a while, and you've had a couple of different angles at it. I guess the first thing I want to ask you before we get into metadata, since you've been through this journey, is, what did it look like when you were not in a cloud, and what does it look like now from the perspective of, the different tools and techniques and availability to implement the metadata strategy the way you want to do it, et cetera, et cetera. So let's start from that context, and then you can just go big on the rest of your metadata story.
Sure, pre-cloud, and I think most organizations you have so many different distributed locations where you had data. I mean, in some cases out of state. In fact, that was the situation that we had with data centers. We had 2 data centers that were out of state. So, there are advantages, obviously, with distributed architectures from a security standpoint, continuity of operations standpoint as well. But the challenge you have is keeping track of the configuration of all these different systems that can be distributed in your building or can be distributed in other states where your data resides. And then now you have the challenges of the provenance, keeping track of, well, where did the data come from? Where is it going? How is it being used? I'm a big proponent of configuration management. In the years I've been in the space business and in other areas, if you don't have good configuration management, you can have catastrophic failures. And you can have catastrophic failures, obviously, from an IT standpoint. We've seen many of our breaches that have occurred because somebody didn't document what port was open. Somebody didn't document how something was configured. I could give a list of what I've seen where there's been problems because of a lack of configuration management. So, you have the challenges with all that distributed architecture, and you really then need to make sure you have good interoperability, you have good relationships between all the different offices, because, when you're doing investigations and you're working with sensitive investigative information, you've got to know where that data is coming from, because data quality is paramount. You've got to know that the data is reliable. You've got to know that it is addressing what the question is you're looking for, and then you have to know the sources. As Fred was talking about, metadata is key about getting the characteristics of your data, the owners, and the users, and that's important to know. Now in the cloud, we're bringing everything together, there's distributed. I live in Loudoun County. Every day I drive and I see the cloud off to the side of the road as we're going down with all the different.
Yeah, there they go. Yeah, right.
Right, but the advantage with the cloud is that you're able to have some level of interoperability going between different data environments. Case in point, Freedom of Information Act is one of my mission areas. We've gotten on an annual basis sometimes 120,000 different Freedom of Information Act requests, and that involves being able to get all the records. We're trying to be as transparent to the American people and to those folks that are asking about the operations of the agency. And so, I take the Freedom of Information Act mission as paramount for transparency. But again, you're looking at so many different records that are out there, and the advantage of having them in the cloud, then it just speeds up the process of being able to pull in, because you're in a common environment, and then you can do the necessary redaction, protections, and then get the information out. So there are some advantages that I've seen just in recent months in the ability to work in that cloud environment. And then also, of course, with COVID-19 and the need to go into a teleworking environment, it's just been a lot easier, more streamlined to do that.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you're making there, where it's bringing it into that environment perhaps somewhat simplified your environment. Undoubtedly, there's situations where there's folks that are still in a hybrid cloud. You might end up back in some sort of a hybrid cloud environment at some point. And undoubtedly, thank goodness that there's a lot of tools and techniques out there now that are available, so that you can manage that in a whole lot simpler and maybe a complex environment because of these tools and techniques, which is great. We're going to talk about sovereignty and integrity on the next set of questions. Undoubtedly, you're going to bring up things like chain of evidence, et cetera, which I know that's where you were going just a minute ago. Before we get to that, two things I want to say. One, unless I'm looking at it wrong here, I see no questions in the question and answers, which I cannot believe that there's not questions for these folks. So I just want to encourage the audience to do that, or somebody school me on making sure that I'm looking at this correctly. Secondly, I'm going to jump over to Mike. And Mike, talk to us about metadata. What are you seeing out there? What's working? What's not? What's the state of the state in regards to the use of metadata and how it's being embraced and incorporated across the community?
Yeah, so I'll build on a couple points the other panel members made. Number one is about keeping that user in mind. You talked about tools. I mean, we see some partners utilizing ginormous Excel spreadsheets that are the data asset catalog. But it comes back to how discoverable is the information from that user perspective, to know what's the universe of the information that's available to them. So that data discovery piece tied to configuration management, a requirements process, et cetera, those elements are really key for that first point of data discovery. And then when it comes to portions of metadata, the common where question, so from a location intelligence perspective, one unique way to link all kinds of disparate data is where. Where is that? Where was that picture taken? Does it have lat long to it? And how is that aligned? And then that becomes a searchable way to expose different data as distributed across many different source systems or authoritative stewards is being held. So those pieces of making sure the data is discoverable and available and understandable to the user, and then figuring out the best mechanism. And what we've found in some cases, the common where question, regardless of mission specific use, becomes a unique way to really link disparate data that you wouldn't have seen otherwise.
Yeah, it's a very good point, and a very interesting topic as again, we start to evolve into this very complex environment, trying to simplify it. We have a question out there, and I want to thank Gail for the first question, and it's a dynamite one. As a matter of fact, I'm going to make sure that Christina gets her a GTSC coffee mug for this question. And I promise I won't hand out any more of your chachis. But it's a good one. And I'm actually going to send this actually out to any of you. And I would ask that certainly the two feds respond to this one. And it's, how are you developing the data analytics skills of your workforce? I think that's a great question. Ken, let me start with you. I see you shaking your head up and down there.
Well, it's in the area of data and data analytics, and in some ways there's a bit of a competition going on with the talent, because folks going into information technology, cybersecurity areas, data management and governance may not always be the most interesting place. I've been an IT person, and then I moved into policy, and I can see that sometimes I like to be able to go down and see the lights working on the equipment and see data flowing in real time rather than reading about it in policy documentation. So it's, what we're trying to do right now is we have a number of centers of excellence that are at ICE in the investigative side and the enforcement side. And what we're doing now is working in partnership with them through our data governance board process to come up with a data analytics framework, which will essentially define what are some of the processes, what are the activities we're doing, where we're going. And then that's going to help identify what are the need areas that we have for the workforce. So that gives an opportunity. First of all, I mean, if, when you're going out looking for talent, we have the federal government's website for doing that, but you really want to ensure that as folks are coming in, they know something about, well, what's the agency doing? What am I going to be able to do in the area of data analytics that's going to grow me professionally and also academically and my general experience and practitioner experience. So it's important to, first of all, define and lay out what we're doing so that so you can encourage and bring talent there, but also walking through what are the different mission areas, the needs you have for data analytics, and that's going to also help build up those skills so that as folks come into different parts of the law enforcement investigation and enforcement side, they're going to be able to learn about biometrics, learn about social media areas, learn about a number of the different types of sources of data that you use as you're doing your data analytics process.
Yeah, you make a couple of good points, and I'm going to take this moment to give a public service announcement for anybody out there in the audience that has thought about public service. I would urge you to pursue it because you won't regret it, and it tastes great is my pitch line that I always use. And you make a good point about, hey, you need to understand, and you will understand operationally what the agency does. Look, I'm a pliers and wires guy by trade, right? I love the blinking lights. But at the end of the day, we all recognize that the decision makers make decisions based on data. They make decisions based on data that's been packaged and put together in a way that's constructed so that they have good information and can make good, sound, trusted decisions about how the entity is going to operate going forward. So certainly a very important area, and I would encourage everyone that wants to be a data geek, wants to be a data scientist, go for it, right? It's the real deal. Mike, how about over at Michael? How about over at TSA? How are you guys doing this? Are you bringing them in as data scientists, or are you bringing them in as computer scientists and turning them into data geeks? How are you all doing this?
Well, we've kind of approached the issue from two different angles. First off, we do have a team of what I'll refer to as data scientists, and they have built out, I should say, their own compute environment in which they have a lot of the different data scientist type tools to, do what I'll call that high-end type of, analytics type work that you would expect to see those folks performing. Conversely, we have also stood up a community of practice that is open to anybody across the TSA organization. And we advertise it, and those folks are free to come. So people who are interested in getting into that area, or people who are currently practitioners in that space in terms of, dealing with BI or analytics. And it becomes an open forum in which tools can be shared, the use of those tools can be shared, case examples can be shared, so knowledge can be passed. And the folks that are also the data scientists participate in that community of practice. So you're able to have in there someone who's been doing this for a long time, who, could teach a college class on it, to someone who shows up their first day and says, well, what is this analytics stuff that I keep hearing about all the time? And so we try to make sure through that community of practice that, information is exchanged that can be useful to that new person to embrace them into the community and to get them excited about being able to start to leverage tools and answer their own business questions, understanding their own data up front and the importance of that. So that's how we've sort of approached that. We also have a parallel community of practice that we have stood up just in the geospatial area. So those that are working with the geospatial data and how they use it and how they apply it to the mission and the business and the specialized geospatial tools, they have their own separate community of practice, again, stratified like that among the different skill sets that they bring to the table.
Love the sort of grassroots kind of organic build here on how you were able to develop that ecosystem. That's pretty cool. Fred and Mike, any thoughts from you all? What are you all seeing out there as far as how the community is skilling up for this very important area?
Yeah, one practical kind of targeted area. We do a lot of DevSecOps work. So our Scrum Masters, they're involved with managing Jira user stories. They're working through the cadence every day. We cross-train them on a lot of BI tools. It helps them visualize and look at, obviously, you get sprint burn downs and velocity and this type of measurement, but they've got a unique perspective into the project, and they're pretty much early identifiers of trends. So we've kind of cross-trained those to become a real hybrid business analyst in conjunction with a Scrum Master is one very tactical approach because of the way they think, the way they speak data to begin with. And I think that's an important thing. The ability to speak data is a new communication, not just the vernacular of the taxonomy and vocabulary and data catalogs and IEPD jargon, but just being able to speak data. And being able to translate data into information. As we said early on, it's all about decision making. So if it's raw data, it's raw data. If it's information that becomes actionable, those are actionable insights that a decision maker can take.
Amen. Fred, any thoughts on that?
Totally agree with Mike's points, but to go back to your original question, are these skill sets, found or grown? In my experience, we're having to actually grow a lot of these people and develop these skill sets. I think the challenge for us is how fast technology moves, right? So I heard a lot of the other panelists talk about, community of excellence and community of practice. I think it's important to set up those communities of focus to really develop those skill sets in those areas.
Amen. Very important, and certainly see where, maybe 10 years from now, the universities are going to be pumping these people out. But right now, I think this is a lot of a grassroots, organic type of development of these skills and capabilities. All right, we've touched on this one a couple of times, and this is, ensuring trust and data integrity as we work in these really multiple, complex type of environments. Certainly identity management being very important about, who are you giving this data to, who are you giving access to, who are you allowing to share this data with, et cetera, et cetera. Ken, now we'll ask the question. What does that look like from ICE's standpoint? Perhaps you got a little bit more simplified as you went into the cloud, but undoubtedly, as you've talked about, you're interacting north and south, east and west, across law enforcement entities that are outside of DHS. How do you deal with that? What kind of technology are you using to deal with that? Policies, et cetera.
Well, the one of the, and I did mention that from a law enforcement standpoint, is so crucial to have the accurate data and information for investigations. But also, we work with a lot of personally identifiable information, a lot of sensitive data. Just Michael had mentioned that, the TSA side, that you have to protect, you have to protect the sources of the information. You have to protect the information on the people. You have to protect the confidentiality of the investigation that's going on, so that it will lead to a successful prosecution. So it's important to have those processes in place. Now, from a privacy standpoint, we have a very structured privacy process. We use privacy impact assessments and system of record notices. One of the department has what they call fair information practice principles, and one of them actually is data quality and integrity. So ensuring that the systems that we're using, the processes that we're using, is ensuring data quality and integrity. And we have to look through. We talked about the metadata and being able to actually put some level of protections in place with for example, with our inventory that we did with all the different data sets. We have identified that information, which is national security information, that information that that should not go out in an open environment versus other data that can be shared. So really, and that's one of the benefits that I have in the ability to work with my chief privacy officer and also the records officer, is to ensure that we're following the Privacy Act and we're following the Federal Records Act processes to ensure that our data and information is protected.
Ken, we mentioned chain of evidence. Do you want to just describe to the audience what that is? Because I think that's really important on this particular topic.
Yeah, so being able to know, first of all, the information, the data, where did it come from? How is it? Who collected it? How was it collected? Right now we're grieving with the events in Boulder and the loss of 10 souls. And we honor Officer Talley for his heroic efforts. But, now, they're going through and doing the gathering of the evidence. I remember seeing on the news, they were asking, how long is it going to take? And they said it's going to take time because they have the suspect in custody, and they've done the charges, and now it's the meticulous process of going through and identifying, the various pieces of it could be an incredible puzzle that's being put together, but they have to go very meticulously through where the evidence is, how it's being collected, documenting that, and all that's going to be part. And there's also information, obviously, looking on the internet, social media to see what's there. So it's the whole meticulous process of gathering evidence, and it, again, that's where the data quality, the integrity comes so much into play. That's going to be part of the overall case that's going to be brought before the court for making the determination of the guilt. And you've got to have the information, and you've got to have it accurate, and have that, again, that chain of sources, how it's being collected, how it was protected, and some of that information, again, is going to be personally identifiable. There's going to be other types of information that have special needs for security and protection.
So critical to protect that data, so critical to maintain the integrity of it, right? I mean, if you think about a weapon, right, getting pulled from a scene, putting into some sort of a storage environment and protected to ensure that evidence is there's a chain there, quote unquote, in regards to chain of custody, right? In regards to that evidence, being able to put it in front of a prosecutor and put the bad guys in jail. Think about that from a data perspective, how difficult that's got to be for you to do that. I'm sure is daunting. And yes, my heart goes out to the thoughts and prayers to the folks in Colorado and their families out there and their friends, and also in Atlanta. Right, it's been a tough few days here. All right, Fred, how about in regards to integrity of data, the quality of the data, et cetera, ensuring the privacy of the data? What does that look like from where you stand? What are you seeing out there? What kind of technologies are being introduced into the environment to make that as bulletproof as possible?
Sure. So to address the question, I'll kind of tackle it in two fronts. First being data integrity, which is basically ensuring the accuracy and completeness of the data. When you look at cloud services model, data is still the responsibility of the owner, right? So like security, data integrity continues to be the responsibility of owners, whether on-prem or in the cloud. So we're seeing, a lot of the same risks still remain, transfer errors, configuration errors, et cetera, along with the added complexity of people moving data into the public cloud versus private cloud and some of the inherent risks with being in the public cloud. When we look at the cloud, there's a couple methodologies to help ensure data integrity. First is provable data possession, basically where clients send out data to untrusted servers and then leverage metadata again to test whether that data has been maintained its integrity, basically. And then you have high availability integrity layer, or HAIL, which kind of uses a similar construct. But to kind of change gears here for a second, I'll jump to data security and kind of lightly touch on zero trust. So the modern enterprise network infrastructure have no single clearly defined perimeter, right? And so, in addition to that, many of the traditional security technologies can't really adapt. So zero trust kind of answers this problem through real-time evaluation of identity-based perimeter, looking at people, devices, and applications. Some of the benefits to the modern IT environment, the ability to secure data regardless of where it resides. From a security standpoint, zero trust mirrors the end-to-end data management approach by providing an end-to-end data approach to networks and data security. And then also when you look at adaptability for multiple scenarios, zero trust can scale to an infinite number of situations to protect data. So, wanted to touch on both topics, but thank you.
Really good point, and timely in regards to the data trust. That's certainly that topic regarding that architecture is being spoken about quite a bit, and certainly in response to the SolarWinds situation, et cetera. Michael, let me go up to you and let's just talk about data trust, data integrity. You do have a complex environment out there. TSA, as I recall, like all the operating components, really prides itself on doing that very well. Top priority for you all. You have very sensitive data over there. How are you looking at that from the perspective of the use of the data, right? And as you're expanding into these never-ending changing environments, how do you maintain that and make sure that it stays intact?
Well, couple of points there. First off, when it comes to part of the data and what have you, there's a lot of, I'll call it controls that get built in your traditional system design, if you will, coming from NIST and that comes under the responsibility of the CISO, if you will, and starting to take a look at activities, who has what level of privileges, role-based access, these types of activities within a given system to be able to see what data is exposed through that system. However, that paradigm starts to shift when you, I'm going to say, take that data outside that system to now see that data in its holistic totality to start applying analytics or BI against those sets of data. And so when we start to move it out of that construct, that's where we start from a policy perspective to start looking into the aspects of the data governance. And as an example, on our data governance board, we have our privacy officer, we have our CISO, so they can be involved in those conversations up front when you start bringing that data outside of the traditional controls that have been built into the system. Additionally, at some point in time, you have to be cognizant of the mosaic effect, where when you bring data from different systems, hey, it's all okay on its own, but you start to marry it up. Well, who's looking at what happens when that data is brought together? And a system isn't going to do that on behalf of itself for you, but rather that's where you've got to apply that governance and the intelligence of the privacy offer and the CISO and looking at that. And I guess then kind of the final point to that is when you want to bring that data together, such as we have that team of data scientists, you have to trust your team that they have the authority to take a look at all of that data being brought together, even if it's privacy data. If they are working to answer a specific business question or a specific mission question objective, just like you have a system administrator with root privileges on your system, you have got to be willing to trust certain elements of your organization that they will be able to look across all of that data in order to formulate those necessary answers to inform management to make the right decision.
And undoubtedly have internal checks and balances to keep an eye on that for, you know, abnormal behavior and all these other things. I'm thinking about insider threat, et cetera. Michael, how about I'm sorry.
I was going to say same type of thing you do for people that have root access to your systems as well. You have processes put in place to address that.
Mike, how about from your perspective, data integrity? What does that look like from where you stand? You know, trust in the data, et cetera. What kind of capabilities are out there? What's working? What isn't?
So I just follow along with what Michael was just saying. So, you know, attribute-based access control, ABAC, authentication to get into systems. There really wasn't a lot of constructs across the department or even at the component level. You know, here's a user, you know, maybe there's two-factor, password, ID, and something else. Once you're in, and then be within the individual system itself. But the department at headquarters, at least, has established the trusted identity exchange and access lifecycle management, two tools that work together. The tie pulls in multiple attributes about either a Fed and or contractor for multiple systems, contractor systems, internal human capital systems, et cetera, that collects all the metadata about the individual person, potential user. And then the access lifecycle management manages the entitlements process, right? So that's the, you know, how do you automate, you know, granting, resolution, enforcement, and then actually the last part, revocation, right? So somebody leaves, how do we make sure that they are then immediately revoked from all their access across multiple systems that they may have access to? So those tools really influence kind of the architecture direction of other systems that are being developed that can concentrate on additional data security strategies at the individual metadata element level that is now possible within some of the individual systems, whether they're in the cloud or in a on-prem hybrid environment.
Raised some super important points there. Going to hold check here for just a minute, open it up to the audience for any questions. Alex, I'm not sure how we're doing this. Are they firing them away live? Are they doing them in the chat?
You're kind of doing both. Right now,
okay.
I see, how are you developing the data analytics skills of your workforce as a question?
Right, we got that one already.
Okay.
We covered that one, yeah.
And if there are others, I mean, there's the Q&A box and the chat. So right now we don't have any others, but we're encouraging you all to send them in now.
Yes, please fire away. I certainly have a couple more questions. One I always like to ask, and I'm going to start with you, Michael. Lessons learned as you're on this journey. You're early in the journey. You talked about that. You know, what are you seeing as far as what's working, what isn't, and certainly the lessons learned of that you're incorporating from others.
One of the lessons that we've learned, and one of the things that we've seen incorporating from others, is getting started on the journey of managing the data as an enterprise asset, as a corporate asset. As I like to tell people, you know, we spend a lot of resources in our organizations managing our budgets and managing our dollars. Well, I submit to you that the managing of our data is just as important as it is to manage our dollars and our budget resources. It just follows different processes, but our data holds a lot of value to us. And hence we need to treat it as something of value. And one of the things that has been most beneficial to us is I set up an executive level steering committee when we were standing up the office of the CDO that consisted of deputy assistant administrators or administrators within TSA. And it was from across the entire organization, because everybody has data, everybody's a data steward, and everybody has their own unique data challenges, but yet a lot of them are in common for what needs to be done to help them address them. And so I found it most beneficial to cast a very wide net across the entire enterprise and get everybody engaged and everybody involved. Hence, everybody also has a little bit of ownership in trying to finally treat that data as being that valuable resource. So that has worked out well for us thus far.
Fantastic, and good point there. We're running right up on the 5-minute mark almost. I'm going to ask Ken to give us his top lesson learned, and then I'm going to go around the horn and just ask each one of you to give your final thoughts. Ken, top lesson learned as you've gone on this journey.
I think the top lessons learned is you really have to manage your data. I mean, you asked me about the chain of evidence, how that's a series of events that in a sequence it's going to account for, actions, and in many cases in the criminal side. But also that's kind of the systems view too, which I'm a big proponent of, because so many of the different activities that we do there's an action reaction. So there's a sequence of things that occur in all walks of life. Homeland Security is one of them, but there's others. So, but you got to have the data, you got to manage that, because that's going to help identify and allow you to move from one sequence to the next if you have the right kind of data and good configuration management of that data, so that you can have a successful outcome.
Excellent pearls of wisdom. All right, I'm going to start from you, Mike, and then ask you to give some final thoughts, if you will, on just a wrap up parting thoughts for the audience.
Yeah, sure. I think you've heard a lot today, kind of the traditional system approach, organize, implement, analyze, and improve the process. But the last thing is, whether it's a life-saving mission, emergency management perspective, law enforcement, et cetera, it's operational. So the last part I always add is improvise, because you need to have the best available data information, because the decision's going to have to be made. And so whether it's the architecture, whether it's the best data or metadata selected, in the end, you have to provide information to a decision maker, and it may impact lives. So regardless of strategy, roadmap, et cetera, there's still operation and mission to perform. And you provide your best available insight and be able to support your.
Absolutely want to have a plan, but everybody needs to learn to play pickup basketball. Fred, over to you.
So to me, I think it's modular data management solutions. And I think the reason is that it offers organizations the ability to kind of grow in the face of changing mission needs, regulatory compliance, or even the next COVID, right? So just kind of that ability to shift and needed, I think is paramount.
Great thoughts. Ken, over to you.
So I think the only to add you have to really facilitate a data-driven organization. I mean, that's not a cliche, and it's not just reserved for CDOs. Data doubles in the world every 2 years. That's the statistic I heard. And that's going to affect us, and the ability to do our mission, to be able to go through the chaff and find the actual needle in the haystack, which might be crucial for a mission accomplishment, or in many cases a prosecution. So you've got to know, have that data-driven organization.
And stay laser focused on it. Michael?
I guess my final thought is that data drives the mission, and what we do with the data is to basically support that mission and doing what it is that they do at the end of the day. And that's kind of why we're here. And in order to have the data drive that, we need to have a healthy data ecosystem, if you will, across the entire enterprise to support the people on the front lines each and every day doing what they do.
I can't tell you how pleased I am to hear all this great information, and I'm sure the audience thinks the same. And for taking the time, again, out of your busy day. I know there's a lot of operational things that are happening out there, a lot of business entities that are happening out there that are so important. And we really do appreciate you all and the listening audience that are tuning in here and talking about this very important subject. Christina, I don't know if you have anything you want to wrap up on.
Just a big thank you to all of our panelists and to you, Luke, for managing this webinar. I think it was incredibly informative for not only federal partners, but also for state level CIOs and others facing these types of decisions. And I did want to just give a shout out to Mark Logic. that MarkLogic is a member of GTSC, and I think they're one of the exemplary members that realizes that it really is about mission. It's about what Michael said, that the data drives the mission, and we all have to work with our government partners to understand that mission well. So this subject matter insight, was amazing, and MarkLogic wasn't even on this panel, but they thought it was so important to bring this critical information to you. So we thank them for that, and we thank all GTSC members for supporting our organization, because our mantra is literally, it's about the mission. So thank you, gentlemen, for all your insights today, and we look forward to working with you throughout the year on these important challenges for Homeland.
Thank you for setting this up. We appreciate it. And with that, I think we've got a wrap. Thanks, folks.
Great week.
Bye now.